From Insight to Impact, UX Secrets Revealed is a podcast by Testing Time. For our first episode, I met with Ivana Müller, Human Factors and UX Manager at Ypsomed. Hi Ivana, I'm really excited to be here. For our listeners out there, we are at the Ypsomed office in Burgdorf in Switzerland, and we're kicking off this very first episode of the podcast. It's a huge milestone for Testing Time for me. I'll be very honest, I'm also a bit nervous, but I really hope it's going to be an exciting project for you as well.
Thank you, Eileen, and welcome to Burgdorf. I'm genuinely excited to be part of this very first episode with you, and it's a big milestone for me as well and for Ypsomed. And I love the energy around this project, so I'm really looking forward to sharing thoughts, ideas, and hopefully some inspiration with everyone listening out there.
That's great to hear. Ivana, before we dive into the exciting projects that you're going to tell us about today, let's focus on you. Who are you?
Of course. My name is Ivana Müller. I'm the Human Factors and User Experience Manager here at Ypsomed and Human Factors Lead in Digital Health. I come from a psychology background and I'm really passionate about making medical technology accessible and truly usable for everyone. My role focuses on deeply understanding user needs, especially the people who rely on our injection devices. And we try to translate those insights into products that are safer, simpler, and more human-centered.
Can you give our listeners who may not be familiar with Ypsomed a brief introduction? What do you guys do?
Ypsomed is a Swiss-based medical technology company specializing in self-injection devices and digital health solutions. Our mission is to empower people with chronic conditions to manage their health independently and really with confidence. And we develop everything from injection devices to connected apps that help patients and healthcare providers to track and optimize their therapy.
I know from our prior conversations that you're doing really unique user research here. You're a Human Factors and UX Manager at Ypsomed. What is your role and what do your day-to-day projects look like?
My role sits really between innovation and product development. On one hand, I work on early stage innovation projects where we really explore unmet user needs, test new concepts, and sometimes even question existing assumptions. On the other hand, I'm closely involved in product development, making sure human factors and usability are built into the process from the very beginning and all the way through validation. And on a day-to-day basis, that means a mix of things. So talking to users and patients, running usability studies, collaborating with engineers, designers, regulatory and clinical teams, and translating user insights into clear requirements and design decisions. A big part of my job is also acting as a bridge, making sure the user's voice is heard in a technical and regulatory discussions. And I believe in MedTech that's really important and special because good user experience isn't just about comfort and convenience. It also directly impacts safety, adherence, and ultimately patient outcomes. So my goal is to help create solutions that are not only innovative and compliant, but also truly usable in life.
So Ypsomed does not only develop these self-injection devices for patients, but also the connected apps that power these devices. How does the research differ between the two?
That's a great question. And you're right that while the principles are similar, the way we do research can look quite different for physical devices versus connected apps. So, for example, for self-injection devices, our research is really hands-on and very focused on safety. We observe patients and healthcare professionals using prototypes, using our devices in realistic use scenarios and use environments, we call it. So we look closely at how intuitive the device is, where users might struggle, and where use errors could occur. And this kind of testing is iterative, so we do multiple cycles, and it's tightly linked to risk management and human factors validation. In line with regulatory expectations, of course, because we need to adhere to them, as well as, for example, authorities like the FDA in the US. And the goal is really to make our device usable and safe. And for apps, for example, the user-centered mindset stays the same, but the focus shifts. It's more about digital interaction. It's more about navigation, about clarity of information, also digital literacy and how easily the app fits into someone's daily routine, for example. We also evaluate how the app works together, of course, with our injection devices and how data is displayed, how feedback is given, etc. And yeah, I think that's it.
Where are overlaps between the two and where do you experience key differences?
Yeah, I would say where the two really overlap is in the core approach, empathy for users. That's most important. So understanding their context, of course, iterative testing based on real feedback. And the key difference is that device research is primarily about physical interaction and patient safety, and while app research is more about emphasis on the digital experience, data handling, and connectivity. But in both cases, though, the ultimate goal is the same, to create solutions that people can trust, understand, and use confidently in their everyday lives.
In our prior conversation, you told me about some exciting research projects, one being the SmartPilot add-on to the Ypsomed autoinjector. First of all, for our listeners who are not from the field and who are lucky not to have these chronic diseases, what is an autoinjector and a SmartPilot, and why is it crucial for chronic disease patients?
An autoinjector is a medical injection device that allows patients to inject their medication themselves, usually at home, in a simple and a controlled way. These devices are commonly used for chronic conditions, for example, like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, and other chronic disease, which are treated long-term. And the SmartPilot is an add-on to the autoinjector in case the Ypsomed autoinjector, and it supports patients during the injection itself. This means it guides them step by step using visual and audio cues, giving real-time feedback while the injection is happening, and automatically records key injection data, which then can be transferred to a therapy app. And for people living with chronic diseases, this kind of real-time guidance is incredibly important because injections can be stressful, especially when you have to do them repeatedly over a long period of time. And receiving feedback from SmartPilot can help build confidence, can help reduce anxiety, and reassures users that the medication has been delivered correctly.
Can you walk us through the user research process for the SmartPilot?
Absolutely. Our research process for SmartPilot started very early and is deeply user-centered. We began with talking directly to patients through interviews, through observations, to understand their daily routines, challenges, and expectations. And from there, we created personas and use scenarios that help guide the design from a user's point of view. Next, we moved into prototyping. We built early concepts and invited users to test them in a simulated but realistic environment. We observed them, how they interact with the solution. We ask targeted questions and also, of course, collect feedback. And this process is highly iterative. Sometimes we make design changes very quickly and test again almost immediately. Finally, we validate the solution in a more realistic use condition to make sure it truly meets user needs and also complies with regulatory and safety requirements. That combination of real user insight and rigorous validation is key in the MedTech area. And one particularly exciting milestone for us at Ypsomed was really achieving this FDA clearance for our SmartPilot. That was a major step and marked SmartPilot as a the first FDA-cleared connectivity solution for autoinjectors. And this achievement is especially meaningful for patients. It means having more confidence and support during self-injections with digital feedback that can make therapy easier and safer to manage. But also for healthcare professionals and partners, it sets a strong foundation for more connected and data-improved care. And for Ypsomed, of course, it enforces our role as pioneer in digital health and opens up new opportunities.
I find this so exciting. It really shows what an important product it is and how it improves the life of patients. When you started with this research project, what was an assumption you had, and what were maybe your biggest surprises from users?
So going into the project, one of our main assumptions was that digital injection guidance would be especially valuable for first-time users. So people who are still learning and building a process with injections and building confidence around that. And that assumption is actually well supported by existing human factors and digital health research, which shows that guidance and feedback can significantly reduce use errors during really this early learning phase. But what really surprised us, though, is that also experienced patients valued the guidance as well. So even people who had been self-injecting for years told us that feedback was reassuring, particularly in moments when they felt stressed, distracted, or didn't feel well. And this aligns with research showing that context matters a lot, like fatigue, anxiety, or cognitive load can really affect this injection performance, even for experienced users. And another big insight was around error messages. Users strongly preferred clear, simple, and actionable feedback. So they didn't just want to know that something went wrong. They wanted to understand exactly what happened and what to do next. This is something we also see reflected in usability and safety research. So well-designed error messages can significantly improve recovery from errors and overall trust in the system.
It's exciting to see that you're working with so many different users as well, and that you're doing research with them. How does the SmartPilot support users that have maybe different levels of digital literacy with these devices, or maybe different physical abilities? For example, I could imagine elderly people or first-time injectors.
So inclusivity is something we design for right from the start on. When we develop SmartPilot, we assume a wide range of users, from first-time injectors and people with low digital confidence to elderly users, as you mentioned, or those with limited dexterity or vision. Practically, that means we use very simple and clear language, strong visual cues, and supportive audio feedback where it adds value. But we also pay close attention to things like button sizes, forces, spacings, as well how instructions are structured and timed. And most importantly, we don't make these decisions in isolation. We really actively test with elderly users or with people who have different physical abilities or levels of digital literacy. And watching how they interact with the solution helps us then to identify barriers early and remove unnecessary complexity.
Have you observed any changes in user confidence maybe over time, or the anxiety around self-injection maybe, since introducing this guided feedback?
Yes, we definitely have seen a change. So the guided injection feedback has really an impact on how people feel during injection. Many users told us that they feel more confident and less anxious, particularly when they're using a new device or injecting in a different location, or simply not feeling at their best that day. And what's important is that the feedback provides reassurance in the moment. It confirmed that each step is done correctly and helps reducing uncertainty and anxiety. And from a human factors perspective, that reduction in doubt really can lower stress and cognitive load.
How do users react to the handling error feedback that you described? For example, when it's just maybe a partial injection or insufficient hold time?
Overall, users respond very positively to handling error feedback, especially when it's immediate and clearly actionable. Instead of feeling frustrated or blamed, many users tell us they feel supported and empowered to correct what happened. And what really matters is how the feedback is phrased. Clear, neutral, and non-judgmental messages, for example, like, please hold for 5 more seconds next time, work far better than vague or generic error alerts. And they help us and the users understand exactly what went wrong and what to do next without increasing anxiety. And from a user experience and human factors perspective, this kind of feedback supports learning and confidence, and it turns potential errors into manageable moments rather than negative experiences, which is especially important in something as sensitive as self-injections are.
Yeah, I can imagine that. How do you design for something like trust in a medical device that collects this personal health data? Are there any insights that influence the transparency or maybe privacy features?
Trust is absolutely fundamental, especially when a medical device is collecting personal health data. From a design perspective, trust starts with transparency. So we make it clear what data is collected and why it's needed and how it benefits the user, of course. And equally important is giving the user a sense of control wherever possible. So user can decide how their data is used or shared, which research consistently show is really a key factor in building trust and acceptance in digital health solutions. And of course, we take our data protection very seriously. Using robust security and encryption measures, but beyond that, technical safeguards, we involve users really directly in this process. We ask them what makes you feel comfortable, what does raise concerns, and what they need to feel reassured. And what we've learned so far is that trust isn't created by a single app feature or device feature. It's really built through clear communication, respectful design, and consistent, reliable behavior over time.
That's super interesting, especially as an outsider, who doesn't have these day-to-day touch points. Do you have an example from your research to something that users specifically asked for?
Absolutely. On a very concrete example was around privacy and data control. Users told us they didn't want to dig through complex menus or legal language to understand what was happening with the data. They wanted privacy settings that were simple, clear, and written in a plain language that they use in their daily life. And based on that feedback, we redesigned the settings so user can quickly see what data is being collected, what is used for, and they can adjust their sharing preferences using clear labels and visual cues. Another example relates to reassurance during use. Some users asked for clear confirmation that everything was going as expected, not just when something went wrong, but also when something went really well. And in response to that, we introduced more explicit positive feedback moments, like confirmations that an injection step was completed correctly. That may seem small to you or us, but users told us it increased their sense of trust and confidence.
In your studies, what would you say were the biggest challenges you have overcome?
I would say there are a few recurring challenges. One of the biggest is recruiting a truly diverse group of users. So especially when we're working with rare conditions or very specific patient population, it's essential for good research, but it takes time, trust, and close collaboration with partners as you. And another challenge is balancing regulatory requirements with real user needs. So regulations are there for good reasons, especially around safety, but translating them into solutions that still feel intuitive and supportive for users, requires a lot careful design and cross-functional collaboration. And probably the most complex challenge is designing for real-world variability. So people don't use our devices in control environments most often. They inject at home, sometimes at work or while traveling, and sometimes when they're tired, stressed, or distracted. And everyone's routines, abilities, and contexts are very different. So our solutions have to be really robust, flexible, and forgiving enough to work across all of these situations. And that's exactly why user research is so critical and crucial. It helps us design, not just for ideal use, but really for life.
I have a follow-up question here. How does someone's routine and environment in general influence how they would handle the SmartPilot?
Routine and environment play a huge role in how people use the SmartPilot. Unlike a lab setting, people would inject in real life, at home, at work, or while traveling, sometimes also in really noisy or poorly lit or distracting environments. And because of that, we design and test SmartPilot to work across very different situations. We think about things like how feedback is delivered, if someone can't hear an audio cue, or how easily users can access help when something unexpected happens. But we also consider physical and cognitive differences, for example, varying levels of dexterity, vision, or, of course, intention, and make sure the design and labeling support a wide range of users. And ultimately, if the solution fits naturally into someone's daily routine and doesn't add complexity, they're much likely to use it confidently as it's intended. And that's why designing for real world is so crucial.
In your user research projects, what type of users do you typically work with? Do they bring specific requirements besides having a chronic disease and this need for a self-injection device?
We work with a very broad range of users, but what they all have in common is that they're living with a chronic condition and rely on those solutions as part of their everyday lives. That context is incredibly important for our work here at Ypsomed. And within that group, we involve people with very different backgrounds and abilities, from digitally confident users to elderly patients, and from people with full mobility to those with limited vision, strength, or even dexterity. And many bring very specific requirements, shaped not just by their condition, but by fatigue, long-term treatment histories, or emotional burden of long-term therapy. And we also deliberately include what we sometimes call niche users, people with rare conditions or unique challenges, because designing for edge cases helps us make the solution more robust and usable for everyone.
Yeah, for me, I can only repeat it. I think it's super interesting to learn about. I think as we are coming close to the end already, what would you advise other researchers who face similar hurdles maybe?
I'd say stay very close to your users. Spend time listening, observing, and really understanding their everyday reality. Don't be afraid to iterate. Even small changes tested early can really make a huge difference. And equally important is collaboration. Working closely with engineers, designers, clinicians, and regulatory experts help turn insights into solutions that are both safe and usable. And I guess finally, always remember who you are designing for. For people living with chronic conditions, even small improvements can have a meaningful impact on their daily lives.
Ivana, thank you so much for being here, or rather I should say for inviting me to be here, like you're here most of these days. But I really appreciate these insights that you shared with us. I hope our listeners out there found it as interesting and inspiring and that they learned something new. I certainly did today. Big thank you.
Thank you, Aline. It's been a pleasure. I hope as well that our conversation inspires others to put users first and at the center of their research. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. We will link an email in the description box because we'd love to hear your feedback and thoughts, especially as it's our very first episode. Our next episode will air in about a month, so stay tuned.